Okay. So I just as you were doing that, I was squeezing out the paints in my palette. Let me just get you to the tabletop here. And so I just squeezed them out. Actually, let's go to this one. And so I just squeezed them out, and I'm just gonna put them on a palette. You can put them on a plate if you want. And I put them in this order. I did not separate the watercolors from the gouache because I don't even do that when I'm painting. I don't separate the gouache from the watercolor. I do have two different palettes for that, but this one for this, I just squeezing them fresh onto a palette type of thing. And so like normally if you squeeze your watercolors, like especially your Holbein watercolors, if you squeeze them into your palette, they last forever and they never dry out because they don't use oxgall. And so you can squeeze the whole tube out and they'll never dry up. They'll never dry to a hard rock. And so that's the greatest thing about watercolor, the Holbein watercolors. Now the gouache is different in the fact that I'm not sure what's in them, but they do dry a little bit more. And so for that, I have a special airtight palette that I put them in. And so it has like a silicone thing, but that then I spray and just put them away in that in a like a airtight container. But those we have five of those, and that's the black. We have the black, the white, and it's the gouache white, gouache black. And so this right here is the gouache, and then I have the one gouache because I have two ultramarine blues. I kind of did that just so you see the difference between how they cover. Gouache covers better. Gouache is basically what it's opaque watercolors, so it's like a really good house paint that covers your black. If you're using white, it'll cover up in one wash. And so that's how I wanted to show you that this the one is transparent and one's opaque, and that's the only difference between gouache and watercolor that you need to know. People think that gouache is a whole different kind of paint. It's watercolor, just it's opaque. And so they used to put whitening agents in them, but not anymore. Holbein doesn't use whitening agents to make their paint opaque. So what they do now is they grind it really, really fine, and so it's almost like concentrated when you're using the gouache compared to the Holbein watercolors because that's transparent, right? It's transparent watercolor and opaque watercolor. And I put them all on the thing like that. So you can do that right now and just put them out, get them out there. If you don't have them, like I said, you can always watch the thing later and try it then.
David,
And
do you know what the brand is of the airtight palette?
the airtight palette, no, it's a let me see if I can find one. Hold on one second. I have one here. I it's a no brand name thing that I got. I forgot where I got it. I actually one of the artists that I took a workshop from had one of them, and they don't have a name. It's just I think he gave me a link on Amazon, and I just it has a silicone seal on it, so it's not
No
a brand
worries.
name one.
Yeah, we
I,
actually carry some Masterson ones on our website if anyone's interested. So
okay,
it's a
yeah.
great
So
brand.
it's just got a silicone seal on it, and so you can just snap all sides to it. And I don't see mine here right at the moment. But if you go to my website, which is davidrbecker.com or beckerart.net. So anytime you're looking for me, don't forget the R in my middle name, David R. Becker. Just type the R in there, and you'll always find everything that's on the internet and YouTube and everything. So you just have to remember the R or Becker Art, which is my company, Becker Art. All right, so let's get right to drawing this thing up. Let me get to my tabletop. And so here's what we're doing today. And as you can see, I'm using the cold press. And if you're using it 140, a lot of times I don't ever tape anything down anymore because I'm going to show you at the end of this how to mount your paper onto a panel and then apply wax over it and then put it into a frame without water, without glass or a mat because you can get much more money for your paintings if you do that. And I'm trying to get all my students you don't need to have a mat or a glass in front of watercolor if you varnish it with Krylon UV protected spray or with Dorland wax. And so I don't want tape down because I'm using this 8.5 by 11, exactly 8 by 11. So they make frames for 8.5 by 11. So you buy a frame for 8 by 11. So don't tape it down. And what you can do is use one of those sprayers, misters, I'm not sure if Plaza Art has misters like this. You know, they're just a mister. They're not a sprayer because they put a mist on it. So what I do is I spray the back. But do this first do your drawing first before you mist it because you don't want to have any water on the top when you're putting your pencil line in there. So later on, what I'll do is I'll go in the back and I'll just spray the back, and then I put it on a towel, but you can put it on like plexiglass or something where it'll stay down. I just don't want it to wrinkle, and and so after I'm using an 8.5 by 11 300 pound only because I don't want to use a thing because I use a towel over everything I do because I can easily then rub my towel into that. So I cheated a little bit, but 140, 300 pound, it's all good. You know, I'm going to do the same way, but I say for 140, just wet the back and put it onto a surface that's flat, like plexiglass or, you know, anything that's flat, basically. And so let's see. So now we're gonna draw it up, and let me just go to this value pattern here. And so this is a scene I took in Lake Superior up in Minnesota. This is the Split Rock Lighthouse, and and when I start any painting, I tell my students always make them black and white so you can see the value pattern, and you can tell the painting is not the same as my photo, right? Because my photo is only there to give me a reference. I don't like the sky on this photo I took because it was in the middle of the day, you know, and so I wanted a little bit more emphasize the sky and make it a different sky because it was just a bland sky as you see right here in the picture. Let me just put this right. See in the picture, it's not a nice sky. It's basically a blue, you know, boring sky. And so I don't want to paint it like that, you know, and I am a plein air painter and it's okay also to do that while you're there. I don't have to paint it just like I see it, you know, and I'm an illustrator from the long ago. So when I want something different, I'm going to make it different. I'm just going to use my artistic license and then just make something else. So as you can see, there's the photo and here's the painting. And so but the value pattern is that the sky and the water are my lights and a little bit of the lighthouse, and everything else is in my darks. And so even though this right here, the rock that it's sitting on, the big wall here, I made that a middle tone, and I put these pine trees in front of it and made them dark, even though they're pretty much light against a darker thing. There's almost like three layers here. And so I decided to make the layers more obvious to me. So I made these trees in front. And then I put the ones behind it that are maybe a little bit lighter. And then I made the rock a little bit lighter, like it is. And so I did that again. It's my prerogative. I can do that. I can do anything I want. You're the artist. You create the painting. I'm not a copyist. I'm not a hyper realist that copies the picture to a T. You can do that, but you gotta have a nice picture when you're doing that. You have a beautiful, beautiful picture if you're going to copy it to a T. And this picture is not, it's okay, but it's not the greatest picture. You know, if I paint it like this, it's not going to be that great a painting. I want a really beautiful sunset or a sunrise, maybe, where the sun is right here, you know, and so I'm going to put that in there and I'm going to make all kinds of fun colors and wet washes in the sky. So that's what we're going to do. All right. And so now we have to draw it up. And so when we're drawing it up, I always turn it black and white and then I kind of grid it out. I put a grid down the middle, you know, on the middle this way, middle horizontally, vertically. I put right in the middle. I want to know where the middle of my paper is, and then I go from there. And so that's what I'm going to be doing. And let me just show you the tabletop because I'm going to draw it right now. And let me just put this picture up there too. Hold on one second. So there it is. And so what I'm going to do is I grid on my paper. See how my paper has little lines on the edges? And normally I have it all when I'm doing my I do Thursday night paint-alongs every Thursday night for free. You can lessons every Thursday. And I have it already drawn up because I only have an hour. Here we have 2 hours, so I can give you an idea of how I draw it up too. So I usually put little marks on the edges, and you can start doing that yourself. You know, find your middle, and I find the middle is right about there, and then I look at the photo and I just start putting big marks in there to not really detailed, just really lightly. I put in marks where these things are going to be at, and now I know because I have my middle my quarter lines, and you can make them really light because you can erase those. If you make it really light with a pencil, you can just put them all the way across, and that way you have like a little puzzle to kind of build. Like look at the horizon line. The horizon line is and actually this picture is kind of a little bit not centered, so let me bring it down a little bit. And so if you see, then you see where the center is, and the line of where the horizon line is, where the water is probably a little bit lower than center. So I'm going to go a little bit lower than center, and it doesn't have to be exact. This is not a portrait, so if the eyes are off, it doesn't matter. It matters if their eyes are off. But here, if that's a little bit higher or lower, it doesn't really matter that much. And so then there's a little bit of a thing back here. And I don't do details. I just do big areas first because I need to know where things are at. And this quarter mark is this little island that comes out here, this little peninsula thing here that comes out a little bit there. So I'm gonna put a line there. It's almost on the top of the quarter mark. And again, if you're off a little bit, who cares? It doesn't matter. It's a landscape. And like if a tree branches off or something or a rock is out, hey, it doesn't really matter that much. Unless you're making it a hyper-realist and you want them to look exactly like the photo, then your drawing has to be perfectly straight on, right on. Now here is a quarter mark, and the land goes a little bit below that. And then the tower itself or the lighthouse itself, there's a mark right on the horizon line, or not right on the quarter mark line. And so I'm just going to put these marks there. And that goes to this area. Then it goes a little bit above the line, the quarter mark line. And then you got the little bit, and see how I'm not detailing it. I'm just putting lines so I can see where things are at. And then again, you depends on how much you want to make it look exactly like the photo, or if you want to change it up a little bit. Maybe you don't like the roof on this lighthouse because you just don't like it. And then you go ahead and change it. You can do whatever you want. It's your painting. I'm so much not into copying a photo. I'm into creating a painting. You're creating a painting, so just do what you want to do. Now the values, I really look at I always look at the values to see that has to be that value. Like this, the rock and the trees and this all the land is dark. Even though it's a middle tone, it's a dark, and everything around it will be the light. And that's all you got to do. Remember, is those are the only things you got to remember is that has to be light and that has to be dark, and not the fact that it has to be black. It just has to be darker than the light area. Now the trees, and also you can look at if you don't want to use the photo and you want to use the my painting instead. I mean, I don't mind that either. You can just use the painting and just use that and draw from that. And I'm going to use that for my trees because I don't want to do the trees like I had them in my photo. And so I'm just going to put a little line there for the trees. I'm going to not draw them all the way in. And I'm not even going to draw the people in or the sailboat. I can just put that in later on. I mean, if you want to, you can. You can put a little sailboat there, make a little triangle. But this is just so that you know where to place things. So I'll go through there real quickly. And I usually just put the trunks of the trees in, and I don't actually put the outer edge. I do that with my brush. And so I'm just gonna put like the trunk in, go all the way down here, and then this little piece of land here that sticks out is gonna be the darkest, and then as it goes back, it gets lighter, the rock back here. And then later on, also the rock itself, you can make that, a little bit more rock light, not just straight lines. And there is some trees on top of there too. And I'm just gonna do where I make my pencil like a nervous shake, the nervous twitch, the Becker art nervous twitch. You just kind of twitch, and that's good enough for the drawing for the trees back there. Like I said, I don't do the outer edge of the trees. I just do the trunks kind of very lightly too. I don't want to see the really, really hard edge on them. And if you need to look where things are in half for the photo, you have to do that yourself. You're gonna have to. I didn't want to mess up the painting by putting things over it, so you just go ahead and put lines over it. And so that's pretty much about it for my drawing. Now I will take an eraser because I don't like those lines that I put across there because they will stay underneath the thing. So I take a kneaded rubber eraser and I just get rid of these lines. And don't use one of those red erasers to erase on your watercolor paper because that can ruin the watercolor paper. So I'm just erasing these little marks I have on the side. this kind of eraser is just a little bit kinder to soft watercolor papers. This is more of a soft watercolor paper. It's not as hard as a arches, but arches absorbs in a lot. This kind of sits on top a little bit more and absorbs in a little bit, which I like for erasing. Like you can erase stuff and take things out of there instead of putting it in. Let's see. And if you do have questions, please ask. The more questions, the better, and they'll let me know. I'll even go down here to see if there's All right, so that's pretty much my drawing. I'm not gonna do really fine drawing of the trees and stuff and the people, and I want to do the big washes. And then if I later on I need to get a little bit more detailed with something, I can stop and let it totally dry, and then go back in and do the drawing. Like if I need the drawing to be a little bit better than what it is, then I go in there later. And so I noticed that in the picture I have this little outlet here, and it's like crossing over the horizon line. But here in this in the painting, I have it even with the horizon line. So I'm gonna make it cross it. I'm gonna make it a little bit higher, taller, and bring it down like this. It's a little piece of land that sticks out. And this goes all the way down to this part. All right, so let's get our water. And my brush, it still has it's brand new. So I'm using the same thing you guys are using. Just gonna use this number 12 brush. If you wanted to use a different, like if I'm gonna wet the whole thing, you can use your other brush, something that's bigger. Oh yeah, yeah, I was gonna say he's spritzing the back yeah. So I'm gonna spritz the back of my watercolor paper because that way it won't bow and it won't wrinkle. So take a spritzer and just wet the back. I'm just gonna wet the back, and then you also wet the surface. Now I'm using a towel, so it doesn't really matter, but just keeping it wet, that way it'll lay flat. It'll lay nice and flat. And now when you wet a big area like the sky, I am gonna wet the whole sky. And but don't spray it with a spritzer when you pre-wet the paper, unless you're going to put a brush stroke over it, because it comes out as a mist and it doesn't soak into the paper. I want the When I put the water down onto the paper, I want it to soak into the paper, and that's a mist, and it will not soak into the paper. It'll just stay on top. And so when I take my brush, I'm just going to wet the whole back right through the lighthouse. Don't even worry about the lighthouse. Don't worry about this. That's gonna be darker. I'm just gonna wet everything. And like I said, if you have a bigger brush that you want to do that with, go ahead. That's fine. I'm just gonna wet it and leave it sit for a little bit because I want it to soak in. And if I misted it with my mister, I would have to go over it, and so that it soaks in because the mist will just sit on top of you. Just do that. So don't ever just mist. You get little dots and stuff, and it really screws up the whole paper. And so I'm going across it. See, I'm just going to go across it. And I'm wetting it because I want to get wet into wet soft edges. That's what I'm looking for. And now in the photo, I used it was just basically all blue sky, right? I'm not going to use any, I'll use some blue in there, but I want the sun to be right there on the edge right there. I'm going to do a little hype. What do you call that? When the sun is right at the edge, it burns it out. It burns out the area. So I want that to be really almost orange right there. And so I'll bring it over closer to here. So I will go from a warm color by the sun and go out, spread out from there. And so I'll take a little bit of the yellow gouache, and now I'm going to use the gouache and the watercolors together. Like they are no difference when you're using them like this. When you're using them wet in the wet, and I even put some white into my yellow, which is the gouache, just to tone down the yellow so it's not so vibrant. And I'm just going to go right here, and I'm just going to put it on there. And I'm going to leave the paper as the sun. That's going to be the only thing that doesn't have any watercolor on it is the sun. It'll be the paper color. Let me color the paper, and I go right into my lighthouse. And I'm just putting some yellow in there. I put a little white. You can also just use yellow really thinly, and the white of the paper will make it lighter. I tend to like to have a little bit of gouache into my yellow, or just even white watercolor into the yellow, just so it's not so vibrant. I don't need that vibrant. And you notice I'm using it wet in the wet, so it's sort of it's like I'm using it like watercolor, transparent watercolor now. And the gouache will become transparent watercolor because I'm just using a little bit of it, and it's so much of the pigment in there that it's just you can use it for a long way. That's one thing nice about the gouache, Holbein gouache, because they grind their pigment finer for the gouache, and so it's like superized. It's like you can use it for so much longer if you're using it wet in the wet. And next to it is I put the quinacridone gold. I mean, not the opera. And so I have the opera, and that'll make me a beautiful orange. That'll make me an absolutely beautiful orange, the opera and the yellow. And that's why I used I think that's so great that they have opera watercolor. Now the watercolor mix it into the gouache doesn't matter. You can do it. You don't have to not do it because one's gouache, one's watercolor. No, they're the same. They're watercolor. They're pigment. And so you can just use that, but I'm using it very wet, and so it's transparent. Even though I'm using a opaque gouache, it's still transparent. I'm just going to go in here now and just work from my light to my dark. But the sky all is light, basically. But I'm going to go in here and then just work it while it's wet because I want all soft edges. And I'm going to make myself a purple. And I'm going to take like, let's take either the gouache or the blue and just make myself a little bit of the opera and the blue will make a beautiful purple. And I'll add a little white to it. Will make me a beautiful lavender. And if you ever know me doing things, I love lavender. So I put some lavender in there or some purple. Make a beautiful purple here with ultramarine blue. And again, either one, gouache or the watercolor. And I'm just going to put this in here. I'm letting things float. And the thicker the paint is, the more you can control it in a wet wash like this. But I don't need to control it right now. I just need to cover up some areas. I can also use the blue by itself, the ultramarine blue. And this is the gouache. I'm mixing it in. This is the watercolor. Either one. Again, it doesn't matter. Just going to go in here and do the sky. So it's going to go from a light right where the sun is, and it's going to spread out to the parts in the top. And don't pretend like that they didn't build the lighthouse there yet. It's not there. Nobody built it yet. So go right through it. Don't worry about it. But don't go into your sun. Your sun is the only part that's going to be white, and also the reflection in the water that you're going to have here. And you can make the sky blue, purple, red, whatever you want. That's up to you, but keep it light. Keep it light. Because this is my light area. That's more important than anything. I don't care what color you use there. You have to keep it light, though. And I'm using the opera. And boy, it mixes so well with things that if you want to make an orange or a purple or, it's just a wonderful color for that. And this, you said, is a nice brush. Yes, these are Holbein gold brushes. I also sell Holbein brushes with my name on it on my website. I have a set of 6, but these are Holbein golds, and they're really nice brushes. I mean, look at the points on these things, and they're not that expensive. They're really a nice brush. And then this is the watercolor burnt sienna. You want to use some of that. But right now we're working it pretty wet. We want a nice look to the sky. We want to keep it light right in the one spot. And I always suggest that you have a towel next to you or so you can dab your brush. Like I have a towel underneath everything. And so I can just dab on my towel. I've really gotten into that. So even when I'm plein air painting, I have a little napkin or towel or something sitting there so I can just dab my brush onto the paper towel or a towel itself. So take your time and just make your sky beautiful and try to do it in one wash. Try to go in here and I'm going to try to, while it's all wet, I want to get in here and get it all while it's wet because I don't want any hard edges in the sky. I want all soft edges. And remember, it's going to dry about 20% lighter. So when it dries, it's going to dry lighter. So keep that in mind. So to make it look right, you got to make it look wrong. It's got to look 20% darker than you want it. And also thicker pigment lets it not if you have thicker pigment, like a thick amount of pigment, it doesn't go as light because it's the pigment that's because right here I put it dark, but once the water's gone, then it's going to be whatever pigment's left. So the thicker the pigment, they'll stay a little bit closer to what you put down. And to control the water or to control the pigment in a wash, get rid of the water in your brush because there's already water on the paper. So I can just take pure pigment with no hardly any water in there and watch this. I can just go in here. Now there's not hardly any water in my brush right now. And so I'm just going to go here and control an edge. I'm going to control this edge because it's all pigment. It's mostly pigment in my brush, and my brush is very, very dry compared to what the paper is. And that way, see, I can get an edge with just the pigment. Now you got to make sure that pigment is the color that you want because the white is not going to shine through as much because it's thicker pigment. It's not going to be as transparent, the watercolor or the gouache. Because you can make watercolor opaque by just using a little bit thicker of paint also. It used to be that people hated gouache because they had whitening agents and everything was white, right? Everything was like pastel colors. But that's not no longer the case anymore. Now they make gouache opaque watercolors different ways, so they don't have to use a whitening agent. And I know Holbein doesn't. Other companies may, I'm not sure. But and actually, look, I'm going to put some white in my sky too. I'm going to put white on top of a dark. So I'm using the gouache white, but I'm floating it. I'm floating it into the water, and I'm going to make little white clouds in here too. And it's all okay. Nobody says, it's not traditional how to do watercolor. It's not traditional transparent watercolor, but it works. I think it works really well, actually. I love putting a little bit of white into my washes. And right here, this cloud, I'm gonna make it a little bit warmer when it gets to the when it gets to the sun. And I'm spending time on this because I'm never gonna touch it. After this is done, this guy never gets touched again. So get it done, one wash. Don't think that you're gonna go back in here again. You can, and I just did a video in my newsletter this week about how you can fix paintings. And if you ever want to get my newsletter, it comes out every Tuesday. And this week I did a demonstration on how to fix your paintings. I took a year-old painting and I fixed it. I washed the whole background out, but you can do as many washes as you want on a paper. It's all good. Any questions, anybody? Like, am I doing something wrong? Or it's like I'm never doing this again. This is like there's no way I'm gonna do it that way.
You may have answered this a little bit, David, but Jody was asking what advantages there are to using watercolor with gouache.
I think the only advantage is that it's opaque and sometimes you can cover up things like mistakes or if you use it wet in the wet. And at the end, you don't have to use like a lot of people. If you don't worry about not being a transparent watercolorist, then you don't have to even use masking fluid because you just use white paint at the very end. So that's what I no longer use like masking fluid because I just use white paint at the very end. I just put a big gob of paint on there. Like that's what I'll be doing for this light down here. And it's a different look, and so it's all up to you. You either use masking fluid or white paint or any other kind of resist and stuff. It all depends on what kind of watercolors you want to be. But it doesn't, it's up to you. You got to decide on how you want to do your work. I like it because it's a little, again, also because it really covers well and I can use it wet in wet like this and I don't have to use as much paint because it's so much more finely ground. It's concentrated. It's like a concentrated paint. And as
Here's
long as your
one.
paper is all wet, make sure you keep it nice and wet when you're doing your soft edges. And once it gets dry or gets too damp, then you're going to get watermarks. And that's not so bad in the sky. You can get watermarks. That's not too bad a thing. But once it's get to that point where you don't see a shine, then you got to stop for a little bit because it's gonna be a hard edge like I just did there. There was no shine there, and see how it's a hard edge now, and that's gonna be a watermark because it's a damp surface and. But you can also maybe put a little bit of water there too and get it wet again. But that's not going to be a great way of making everything really nice and soft edged. So it's just practice on how to get soft edges and hard edges. And so that's my lightest part is right there. Now there's a little bit of white there, but that's okay too. All right, from there we're going to go right into the water because the water is the same thing, just in reverse. And so I'm just going to go right here. And again, pretend like they didn't this big rock hasn't come into existence yet. So we're going to go from the bottom here, lighter. I'm just going to go reverse of what I did here. And actually, this guy maybe should be a little bit darker there or not. And I'm going through all the rocks. I'm going through the sailboat. Again, like if the sailboat was lighter, I would either have to put masking fluid or wait until later and do it dark with gouache. And so I'm just reversing. I'm looking at what the colors I had above. And look, this is only what really this is because I have two ultramarine blues, one gouache and one's it's not that many colors. I mean, black and white is called black and white. I darken a color with the black. I lighten it sometimes with the white. And so you got three colors, but the opera is really nice when you get to get an orange. I can also get it with the red and orange too. I can do that. And look at how vibrant this gouache and look at just what I did. This is gouache red. And look at that. I mean, it just covers the whole palette and it's just there's no you can't see through it. But if I wet it like this, look at how you can then see through it. And so I'm just going to put that down here, I think. And I always like to try different things, I watercolor. And then when I heard about the gouache and stuff, at first I thought it was a whole different kind of paint. But the more and more I use it, it really isn't a different paint. It's just an opaque watercolor. Like they do make acrylic gouache now, and that's just acrylic that's not so transparent. Again, it's gouache, so it's opaque. All you got to remember with gouache is that it's opaque. It's like a good paint that covers really well. And with gouache, you can use it like oils and acrylics because you can use it really thick. Watercolor gouache, you can only use to a certain thickness, and then you should not use it more than that. Oh, I just went over my light area here. Oh boy. So let me show you how to do that. So I was saying that you can rub out, and so what I'm going to do is take water, and right here, I'm just going to drop water right down here, and just pick it up, and I'm going to take this brush and absorb the pigment. And this paper is great because it rubs out really easily. So I did that on purpose, right? So we're just going to go in here and just going to go in here and just rub that out again. So there's a light wash or the light reflecting from the sun straight down, right? And then up here, I'm going to make it a little bit white and light blue. I'm going to put together and do that down here a little bit more. And if you want, one thing that watercolors for some reason don't tend to use very much is pastel colors. They like pastel artists get to use pastel colors, but why don't watercolors get to use pastel colors? So I think it's good to add white into some of your paints. So always have white in your palette because you can make a light blue out of a dark blue. So you have like two colors right there, and that's like I like having white in my palette. And then you can use gouache white or watercolor white. They're both basically the same thing, except for what the additive is in them because it's white, right? And so most watercolors never use white. But if you want to lighten a color, like this light blue, if I want to make a light blue, just add blue and white, and now I got a light blue. Now it's really messy because I have the yellow in there, so it's kind of greenish blue, but see how you can mix a color with white and then you get a light color of that color. So this is a light blue and I can float it in the pigment and it'll look nice. It'll be a light blue that's floating. Now I wouldn't put it on thick like gouache, like an acrylic. I wouldn't use it like a oil painting because I'm not at that stage yet where I should use it like that. I'm going to use it later like that when it's dry and I'll put little dots in and use it dark like that. But then it becomes an opaque watercolor, but it's still a watercolor. And people are asking me all the time, do I have to call it something different that it's not a watercolor? No, it's a watercolor. It's an opaque watercolor. All right, so there's my, and I'm right away get the reflections from the stuff that's over here. I can put a little bit of that color right away into the water. That's just a little bit darker, so I'm using the burnt sienna, yeah, the burnt sienna, a little bit of blue, and that makes it kind of a brownish. And so I'm just going to kind of put those reflections in there already, even though I don't know exactly yet what's up there going to be exactly, but I know well enough that this is going to be darker, and so I'm putting my soft edges of the reflections in the water. And again, when I get by the sun area where the sun is, I'm going to make that yellow and orange. I'm just going to put yellow and orange. And my whole paper here is still wet. So I'm not going to get any hard edges, but I don't want any hard edges yet. I want all soft edges right now. So I'm just going to put that in there like that. Little reflections. And again, when I get to this area, everything in this area right here is going to be orange or yellow because the sun is so bright, it's going to give it that line of of color or white. And again, if you missed it or you didn't use masking fluid, and you want it later, get it light again. For one, I can rub out on this paper. Like, see, I'm just pulling it out again. Or what I can do is I can just put white paint. And when you learn watercolor, your teachers in art school always tell you never use white or black, but or mix your blacks and make your white no whites. But I don't in my classes I say go ahead and use them. You just know why you're using them and use them correctly. Like I would never use white to make like to kind of correct the mistake. Like I got to go over and just put a big gob of white on there because I put something like there. No, I don't do it that way. But use it for your advantage. Use it in a way that makes it better, your painting. So there's my lights, right? That's all my lights. That's my light area. The I could put in maybe a little bit of reflected light into the lighthouse. Like there's a little bit of, no, there's not really light. Uh, It's still wet up there, so let's just leave that alone. So basically, those are my lights. What time do we have here? Gotta make sure we can get this all done. And so there's my lights, and you could take a hair dryer. I'm not sure if Plaza Art has these new craft. I just got one, and I don't have it here with me. But or I use a Wagner stripper, a paint stripper. But they have these new hair dryers. They're called Craft something, and they're really quiet. They're really quiet, and they don't blow a real lot of air out on the thing like a hairdryer does, and it's really loud. It's kind of like a power stripper, but I'm going to put it on low setting. I'm just going to dry it really quickly, and more just this area right here where the rocks are and stuff, and do that really quickly. And just like the crafting tool, you can also use that. You can use it pretty close and just get it dry really quickly. And it's not going to blow any of the paint around because the hairdryer sometimes blow the paint around because it's too wet. Yeah, acrylic gouache is not definitely not water soluble, and once it dries, you can't do like watercolor gouache, which is much better in that aspect. Most people that use the acrylic gouache are also more oil painters and acrylic painters because they like to use it thick and not like we're using it really wet into wet. So now we're going to go into I have a steps that I take. I call it the Becker R3 step. Every painting I do is a watercolor and gouache. It starts with my lights. And so step one is your lights and your colors to kind of create your color scheme. And then step two is all your large mediums and large darks. And that means large, like the whole large um, big rock that this lighthouse is on and the trees back there. So that's all one big medium. And so I'll get that first, and then I'll get my big darks, and that's step two. And step three is my large dark details and light details. It's three steps. Every painting I do is that three steps. So now I'm going to get my hard edges because this is dry now, and I'm just going to get the rock. And the rock's going to start out with an orangey yellow right by the sun here. I'm going to put it really nice and bright right there. And right away go to more of a middle tone. And then maybe an orange, it goes to an orange. And then it gets kind of, grayish and purplish. And again, since we don't have purple, we got to mix our purple. So just purple, blue, and red, right? That makes purple. And I would use oh, look at that. I would use the opera because that's a really beautiful color to make a purple with blue. And you also the red looks good too. And you can also use a lighter wash of the burnt sienna. And you notice again, I don't care if it's gouache or if it's watercolor because I'm using it thin. I'm using all this like transparent watercolor. Even though it's gouache, I'm not using it thick. I'm not using it on a dry surface. Now, this is what I call wetting as you go along. So I don't wet it first. I just wet it with my brush, having a lot of water in it. And then I just put it right over it. I'm gonna leave a little white on the edge, on this edge, because I want this to look like a rock. Gonna go right down to this edge. And I'm floating pigment in here. And once you get a wash, like if you wanted more texture, you have to wait for it to dry, and then you can like go like this. You can kind of press down like this on dry paper though. When anytime you wet your paper, it's gonna have to be wet in the wet. It's got to be a soft edge. I mean, that's how you get soft edges, is you wet your paper and get a soft edge. Now these trees back here, I'm gonna make hard edged, and so it's dry. So now I'm just gonna take a color and do trees, whatever color you want. I don't like green trees, so you're not gonna see hardly any green trees in here. Even these back here that are pine trees, because the sun is so vibrantly red, I'm gonna make these trees red. You can make them green if you want, a dark green, that's fine too. But I'm gonna make them more purple and more like it's a fall scene maybe too. A little bit yellow, and then just go in here and make the. And what's important is the outer edge of these trees. That's what's more important than anything. What's inside the tree doesn't matter because it's the outer edge that shows what it is. A hard edge on the outer edge. Inside there, it's fine. You can make it whatever. And you can keep it dry. See, I'm just pushing my brush on a dry surface and get a texture, because that's how you get textures on a dry surface. You can't get too much texture on a wet surface unless you're using salt, cellophane you can put down there. You can put something on top of it, but yeah, when it's wet, you're getting a soft edge. And that's what you want anyways. I mean, that's why you're making it all wet, so you get a soft edge. If you want a hard edge and texture, let the paper be dry and run your brush across it quickly. And then here, everything we do is like a little bit of a wash. It's everything we do in watercolor is like a wash. And I'm saying watercolor because it's you can do it with gouache or watercolor, transparent watercolor, because it's wet. Now, if I'm using gouache and I'm using it on a dry surface, it's going to be thick like an oil, so you have to watch out for that part. And this is only a middle tone. These are not my dark trees. The trees in front are going to be the dark ones. So this has to be just the middle tone. And this got a little bit too light there, so I'm going to darken it up a little bit. And you notice how like the sun now here, I'm going to put a little bit more of that opera right here. Put that into the orange a little bit. I'm going to make the lighthouse a little bit of purple on the edge here. I'm just going to do that right now too. It's going to be a little bit darker, so I'm just going to wet it and then just make sure the edges are hard edged. So make them sure they're dry. But inside the lighthouse, then you can make that wet and let that go from light to dark. And again, on the edge, I'm going to take pure white and yellow, and I'm going to put that right next to the sun. The sun is burning out this lighthouse right there. And I'll go right to an orange. Orange is really easy to make with the yellow and the opera. Such an easy color to make with those two colors. And I'm not doing the top of the thing because that's a detail, right? The top of the lighthouse, that's detail. I don't have to worry about that yet. The side of the building back here, that's more of a violet. And so take a little violet back here. And again, are you making your picture 20% darker than you think, than you would like it? Are you making it look wrong to be right? Because you have to make it look wrong. You have to make it look darker than you need to. It's so hard. I know it's so hard to do that. And you're like, oh, it looks way too dark. It's gonna dry 20% lighter. Just remember. So while it's wet, if it's right while it's wet, it's wrong. One of those sayings I always have all these sayings that I talk about, and that's one of them. All right, so this little strip of land back here, that's gonna have to be light, and so I'm gonna make that orangey, and that little bit piece of land back there, and make sure it's dry. 'Cause I want a hard edge. Just gonna bring that down into the water. Bring that, and that's way in a distance. I kind of like it better the way I did it way, way back there, but this is not quite as far back. That's okay. And then this piece of land that comes in here, that's even darker, but there's a part of it that's a little bit behind it. So I'm going to put a little bit of that in there first. Make sure this is dry now, though, because you want hard edges. You want hard edges now. And anytime you need a hard edge, you have to have it dry. It's the local train going by. If you heard a whistle blow. All right, and so now let's get our I'm gonna get some little lights over here, some orangey colors. Actually, somebody just asked, what does everybody think of laying down a sketch using watercolor pencils? Which is really funny because Holbein, I think, is working on some watercolor pencils in the near future. And boy, I can't wait to see those because I'm thinking, when you're sketching, it's not bad to have a watercolor pencil because it's basically pigment again, right? It's pigment. You put down a pencil, and it's the same thing you're doing now, but you can do wet into wet, wet on dry. You can get really detailed because you can sharpen your pencil too. So, okay, now we're going to do this dark. We're getting darker as we go along, right? That's our middle tone. Now we're going to get our dark in here. It's a little bit darker right here. Another tree there. I have this trick with a brush like this. I have a trick where when you use a brush like this to make a pine tree needles, what I do is I take the brush and see the point on it, but I bend it backwards. I go like this, and I use the back bristles. I use the back bristles, and I make pine needles. See how you're kind of you don't use the point of the brush, you bend the point back. See, I'm taking the point, I'm bending it back, and I'm kind of making these little hairs on the back of the brush behind the front point, and those give me a pine needle look. And you can mostly only do that with round brushes, especially these Holbein Golds. It works really well. Just let me know when we're halfway through because I need to know how far we're along. So somebody please let me
We're
know.
about 5 minutes till halfway through.
Okay. So now I'm going to go into this front part here and make the land with a burnt sienna, maybe a little bit of burnt sienna. And I wet it, but I wet the inside of the shape. So this is land, and so I'm wetting the inside shape of the land. And this is still a little wet here, but I'm going to just kind of go in here and get the outer edge of the land that's on the side. And where the water hits the land, I'm going to make that nice and dark. I'm taking even just some pure blue with the brown with the burnt sienna. I'm just gonna do this on dry because I need a hard edge. I'm just bringing this around. I just gotta make sure that we finish this so I can show you how to mount it and also put it into a frame. So, and so I'm making this nice and dark. And anytime you want it darken, you can also use black and then any dark colors you have on your palette. Now, since we only have dark blue, burnt sienna, and black, so if you want it warm, you just add some red to it. And I don't mind using the gouache red because there's so much pigment in there. It's so much more pigment in the actual tube, and it's so concentrated. It really hardly need any of that paint. Just a little bit goes such a long way. And so I have almost every color now, almost double. Like I have the gouache version of it, and they're not all the same though. But the ones that I use, some of them I use that are the same. I have one that to be the watercolor, one that's the gouache, and I find that a lot of times I use the gouache even when I'm doing these big areas because it goes so far. It's just so concentrated down here. So see how that's the dark part of it now? And now this is still wet. I gotta dry that real quick so I can do the trees, the pine tree. And so this is my large darks. Remember I said the second step is my large mediums, large darks. That's my large dark. It's not detailed, but it's just my large dark. Turn this on real quick. And I don't mind drying with a hairdryer as long as you realize that you're not letting it soften. If you're doing soft edges, you're not letting it soften enough by itself. So I don't like using the hairdryer a real lot, but for something like this, I gotta get done fast. So go ahead and use it. All right, so see how fast that went? It's a stripper, so it's gonna get really hot. And okay, now we're gonna go and do the trees, the pine trees, and everything dark. That's still big. It's still a big area. And so now I'm gonna mix a blue, ultramarine blue, with the yellow to get a green, and then I'll mix a little bit of burnt sienna with that to make it darken it. Yellow, blue, and green, and so make a nice dark green. And then since it's not really dark, I'm gonna make it black with it too. Mix a little black in there, and then make it nice and rich, nice rich dark. And I'm gonna do that trick I just showed you on the other paper. I'm gonna first do the tops of the tree, and I have the stem or the trunks that I put in there. Remember, I just drew the trunks. And these other things, I'm just gonna push down my brush to get the big branches. See how nice that works with the branches, and gonna bring that down. And now these are darker than the photograph, but like I told you before, I'm not copying the photograph. I want these to be separate from the background. So these are in front of the background. I think it works really well when you show dimension in your painting. If you don't see it in the photograph, then somehow figure out a way of showing dimension in your painting if you don't get it into your photograph. And this is not as much floating in here, but once it's wet, once it's a little wet, I like to take other colors and float them in there. Like I'll take a little bit of yellow and I'll just let them drop in there and just let them do their own thing. That's the best thing I love about watercolor. It does its own thing so much. It takes over because it can just do its own thing and make it soft edged. It can float on top. I can put like let's make a bright yellowish color in there with the pink. And you just drop it in there a little bit while it's wet. It'll be just floating on top. It'll look beautiful. It's good to get a little bit of red in these trees too, because they're not all just one dark color. The sun is really bright, and so you're going to get a little bit of orange in the edge of them. So I'll do that on this one back here, which is a little bit lighter. I'll just start that with an orange or a pink even. I'll put that behind. That's a little bit farther behind that tree. Go a little bit darker and throw some darks in the wash. Once it's wet, then you can do wet in the wet. You can throw a color in there, let it float. My whole thing is about floating your pigment. It's floating in it in water, right? And it's softening its own edge. You don't ever have to soften watercolor or gouache's edges when you're using it in water. Yes, you do when you're using it thick, but I'm not using it thick right now. I'm using it in water. I'm floating on top of water. Now I'm gonna go in here. I'm gonna give it a little bit of texture to that dark too, so that doesn't looks like rocks. I'm gonna take it's dry right now, so I'm just gonna rub the side of my brush across some of this just to get a little more textury. Is that a word, textury? A little bit more textury.
Um, David, Fran is asking if you can use dried watercolor black, like half pans, the same way you would use to paint from the tube.
Um, it depends on which paint you get. There's some that don't rejuvenate really well. As long as it rejuvenates where you can pick up actual pigment and not just a tint of color. When you're just picking up a tint of color, you're not, you can see how granulated I'm using it and how thick it's using it. So a lot of times if it's not a great paint that you can't pick up a lot of paint and you can't rejuvenate, then you're getting a tint of color, which will be always everything will be really light. Like for this, I need a lot of pigment. And that's always good with gouache too, because there's so much pigment in gouache. But yeah, I know that Holbein also makes pans, but I've always used tubes, and I like in my palette, my regular palette, which I don't think I have here at the moment. Oh yeah, here's my regular palette. So this is my regular palette. And you can see I squeezed the whole tube out. And this, if I want to use it again later, it instantly rejuvenates. So I don't have to worry about squeezing the whole tube there. It's never going to waste any of the pigment. Whereas some of it dry out to a hard rock, then it's so hard to rejuvenate them. And some of the pans are like that. But most of the pans, I think, are pretty decent. You can rejuvenate, put a little water in them. And you don't have to spray these first either. Like some people spray their palette first. You don't have to do that with Holbein because they don't use oxgall. They just don't use oxgall, and so that's what makes them hard. And so look at this nice pine tree right here. This is the tall one. This is the big one. I'm using my brush like I showed you, right? See, I'm just making those big used brush strokes. I'm kind of bending my brush backwards, but you can't see when I'm doing that. And get a little bit more yellow. So one thing I want you to notice is that I'm using this like watercolor right now, like transparent watercolor, even though I'm using gouache. Yeah, I think with gouache, it's the same thing. A lot of times, depending on what kind of gouache you use, if it's not fresh, it's hard to. It's a little different when it comes to the gouache part, and that's how come I use those containers that keep it wet. So you have to watch out for the because it is not like the watercolor, Holbein watercolor stays wet and rejuvenate instantly, but the gouache I put into a thing because it's still a bit different. It does dry a little bit harder, though it does re-wet. It does re-wet, not too bad though. If you keep it in those containers, the airtight container, and you spray them, I spray them. And in my all my workshops now, I used to do a lot of workshops. I'm only doing two this year. I'm doing one in Santa Fe. If you look at my website, I'm doing one in Santa Fe and one at Dillman's, and all the supplies are included. And so I have my supplies of gouache, and both classes are gouache and watercolor like this that we're using. And I have all those little cases of them, and I have them all for you. And I put some new stuff in every time because they're so far away. The workshops, but they're still really good to use after students have used them over and over again. I just add a little bit more pigment and let me get up for a second. I'm going to show you one of those palettes just because I haven't I just see one. This is the gouache container that I use, and it's basically has these little latches. You put them on plate like this. I'm not sure if Plaza Art has something like this. I probably do. And see, it's just like covered, and then I spray it. And these are the colors I had. This is one of my student palettes, and so I just spray it, and I put the cover back on, and you can tell it's even. Oh no, it's not wet, but this has not been used for about, I would say, when was the last time I did one? I think like a month ago, 2 months ago now. And so I'll just spray it up, and it'll be fine. It'll be gouache. But there's like a silicone seal right there, and you just put it over it. And then you snap it closed and you wet it, and it stays really fresh for quite a bit of time. I'm not even sure what they call those. Oh, what did I just do? Oh my gosh. I just put some Chinese writing in there. So I'm going to show you how to get rid of stuff when you get it done. I accidentally put my brush over that. So what you do is you're just going to wet it. I was trying to show you Chinese writing or Japanese writing since I was using Japanese paint, Holbein. So see, you can always go back in. You can go back into an area. I'm just gonna wet it, pre-wet it though, and I'm just getting out the pigment that was put down accidentally. And so I'll just go back in there. Now I have to do the whole area here because can't just do parts of it. All right, so I'm almost done my trees over here. And now while I have this color in my brush, I'm gonna take it because it was from the trees, right? Take it right down into my water. I'm just gonna do the hard edge reflections right away. Just gonna take that right down here. That tree right there is this tree right there. I'm just gonna bring it down and just give it kind of some reflections. This one right there. And I first started with a color that's right here, and that's kind of orangey. So let me do that first. I'm just gonna take that. And actually, I should be doing the land first here. And so I'm just going to take this. And now we're at step 3. And this is my large details or my details in general. And so you do your details first and you do the larger ones first. But this now is the third step. You know, you're getting into details now and it can be hard edge. It doesn't have to be as much floating pigment. It's you're identifying things now. You're identifying shapes and what's around the area. Nice reflections. How far past halfway point have we gone? Please let me know. So see, that's the reflections of what's above it. And even this over back there can be reflections, but make them lighter, make them light reflections. And I'm just going to take a little bit of the opera, a little bit of the yellow, make it an orange. I'm just going to make this back here a little bit. And then even this whole thing over here can be a little bit lighter, but still reflections from what's been behind there. And then the waves, you break it up with waves so that you make it like a little Z's. You do little Z's there to break it up like it's farther away. But the more waves, the more waves that are smaller waves, you just got to put all these little lines in there. And just a dark for this one again. I'm using blue and the red to make a kind of a purple. And then the green, right? We had green in there, so I put a little bit of yellow into that. And I'm just gonna make this dark. And it can be hard edged. It's okay to be hard edged now. I'm actually doing details. And if you can trace what you see in the photo, that's fine. Now it's the time. This is when you do it.
So we
And
are
make it
at, we have 50 minutes left, David, and we do have a question from Kirsten. Any tips for someone who lives in a dry climate where the washes dry super fast?
Constantly get one of these misters and spray it a lot when you're and also learn how to spray the mister and go from a distance. Like go from a distance and let it just lay down. And it's almost like those misters when you're in a hot climate and you walk through them. It's like a little mist. You gotta keep it damp. So just take your mister and spray it once in a while. Just really lightly, not heavily because it's gonna wreck everything. But yeah, just really lightly go across everything. And since we only have 15 minutes left for the whole thing, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, let me just really quickly do the details of the thing, and I'm going to show you how to wax it and mount it.
Yeah, 50. We have 50 minutes.
50 or 15?
50.
Oh, okay. Then we have more time than I thought. I thought
Yeah.
you said
Okay,
15
good.
minutes. I'm like,
Yeah.
holy crap, we only have 15 minutes. We gotta go.
It
All
didn't
right,
go
good.
that fast.
Okay. So I got time, so I don't have to rush this. Okay, so I'm doing just doing the details. Get the details in here. And so here is look at the photo and just copy what you see in the photo. And for this lighthouse, let me get the other picture up here real quick so I can see what the actual lighthouse is. So you see how the lighthouse has some darks in it and actually I think I have it also overriding this. So I'm putting up the picture there because I want to see the details of things. And so for that, I'm just gonna copy what I see. I'm basically gonna copy what I see up there. And if you don't like some of the things you see and you think you can make them better, go for it. You know, sometimes there's something you may see and thinking, oh, I do a lot of lighthouses. I like when they have the little lightning rod on top and they have a little ball up there. You know, even though this one may not have that exactly, but you do what you want. unless you're doing it for this actual company that wants it they want the exact thing, then yeah, then make sure you have it exactly like they want it. We'll walk out here, and then it has a nice the window up here and has a little bit thing right here. And I kind of drew it bigger than it actually is. I have a massive, mine's pretty massive right there. I can tone it down a little bit, but that's okay. It's just a small little painting, so that's fine. I'm gonna use red and burnt sienna for the rooftop, like for the rooftop, even though it's not all, oh, it kind of looks red, the rooftop. I'm just gonna take a little rooftop, and I'm using, oh wait, I should not be using a different brush. So this brush, look how detailed this brush gets. You can use this brush for the whole thing, and because a really fine point on this brush. That's what I love about these Holbein Gold brushes. They just come to a point like nobody's business. I mean, look at that. Even their flats come to a really sharp shape. You have to ask Plaza Art if they sell them. I'm not sure if they sell. It's hard to find these brushes, and I always tell them, "Where can I buy these?" So I'm not sure if Plaza Art has them.
We can always order them for you.
Okay. There you have it. And they have every brush, like on every brush they have, and they're really good brushes. They're really, really nice brushes, and they're not that expensive. They're very, very reasonable for what they are. So see, I'm doing details in the building now, and now I'm also going to put people down here. And when I do like the people, I just do I do like the carrot stick people, where you put the body first, and then carrot stick for the leg, and then you do a little that for the head. And make sure they're not too big. I mean, they would actually be small. Look at, you can see them in the picture. They're really, really, really small, and I make them a little bit bigger. Otherwise, you won't be able to see them at all. But yeah, don't make them too big though. Really, this is a big expanse, and you can make them bigger than that, though. It's up to you. Do some darks back here a little bit. Then the sailboat, and the sailboat, I'm gonna make it kind of a bluish gray for the sail, because it's gonna be in this area right here. Just gonna do a little triangle. And make sure it's dry so you get a hard edge. And I'm just gonna make a little triangle there. Then a little bit of the bottom of the boat, and then the trailing away of the boat. I'm just gonna make a little trail coming this way. And I know there's no boat in the picture, only in my painting. But you put in what you want. And I love sailboats in my paintings. I love anything about nautical scenes. And so to me, you don't have to put that in there if you don't want. You could actually put, another little island there. You can do whatever you want. I like to put boats in my scenes. And it's something to be said about, you're the artist, you do what you want. As a beginner, yeah, you may want to follow some of the things that you see in the picture, but don't follow the colors. The colors can be anything they want. Follow the values if they're good values. The value pattern is so important in your thing. Now I'm going to show you something because I don't like something. I don't like this big bright red here, right here. And let me show you how to take care of something like that, because I know a lot of you will do something you don't like, and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't like that, and I want to go over it, and they're just going to try to rub that, or there's a way of making things better after you get done with something. So what I would do to that area is I wet it with clean water. I just wet the area again. Nothing will happen if you just wet it really lightly. If I just wet the area again, and if I don't like that particular color right there, and I just want to maybe rub it, I can even just tickle it. I can tickle it a little bit because it seems a little bit thick. I can tickle it with water and just make sure it softens itself again. And if I feel like I need a different color, or I first got to get rid of the pigment if I don't like that pigment, and so I just let that soak back into my brush. And if I feel I want to put another color there, I can do that, but make sure you're not really, really wet because I just dampened the surface a little bit. And it's not going to give me a watermark. It'll be fine because what'll happen is I go a little bit farther than I want to do something to with the water, and it's just floating there. You can also just spray the whole top and just you have to watch it though. You don't want to make it too wet. And then you just kind of go with another color. I'm going to go with a little bit more of the light blue. So mixing a little bit of light blue, and I'm just going to put a little light blue in there. Let it float though. It has to float. You cannot put it on thick, and it's got to be able to float. Floating means that the pigment is literally floating in water. And so if it's not floating, if you don't see it's floating and it's too thick, too thick and stuff, then you're not going to get the soft edge, and you're not going to make it look very like it's a first wash. Like I'll make this look like a first wash because I'm letting it float and it's softening itself. It's softening itself. And so you can go into any wash you want again and again. It's just how you do that and how you re-wet it. And I do have some, I splattered some water spots, but don't touch them. Let them dry by themselves or take paper towel and just dab it down on a dry surface. Like just tap it down and get rid of that. But don't, it also depends on what paper you're using. This paper is really great for taking things out again. The Stonehenge that you're using. Like if you're using the hot press, that's a little bit more difficult too, because that's everything sits on top a little bit more. It sits on top of the paper a little bit more. All right, so now I'm gonna go in and use some white paint. Now I'm gonna use the gouache like an oil painter. I'm gonna take my brush, dip into pure orange. It's pure orange, pure white. And my brush is just damp. And I'm gonna hit sides of the brush. And now this is like you could do this with masking fluid. I'm using white paint, and so I'm hitting the sides of the rocks where the sun is there. I'll put a little top in there, and so this is not transparent watercolor now. I'm using it like a oil painter or a gouache painter, basically an opaque gouache painter, because I'm using it thick, and I'm covering up whatever in front of it and whatever behind it. I'm covering that up. But I'm putting little lights on where the sun is shining on these rocks. And these rocks will be probably a little wet. And so I'm going to and I'm also going to take pure white and right down here, add my reflection into the water where the sun is hitting the top of the wave. And now I got my really nice light there again, right? And so you're getting all this sparkle and on top of the rocks here a little bit. Not as light over here, but straight down. And also you can put dots of white right here. And put little dots because it sparkles. The water sparkles when you looking into the sun and you're looking at in the water because it's basically a mirror. And it's like a million mirrors because it's got waves and each wave has a little part that's shining in your eye. So there's like a million little waves going there and little mirrors that are shining in your eye. So that's why you get all the sparkle right there, right by the sun, especially when it's in front of you and you're looking into the sun. And I'm using pure white and I'm making it thick, very thick. And this is not transparent watercolor now. And you couldn't submit this to like TWSA, Transparent Watercolor Society. This is a no-no then. But if you don't submit to those societies and you want to make your painting look great, like really sparkly, hey, it's one way of doing it. It's a pretty easy way of doing it, actually. And now if I want to get more waves, maybe even to show with an opaque blue, that's okay too. You know, you take blue and white and maybe do some waves that are a little bit bluer here. And this is thick. I'm using it very thick. I shouldn't use it this thick though, because I want to show you how to wax it. It needs to be totally dry. So I may have to wax it different painting. Or no, I'll dry it with my dryer. How's everybody doing? Everybody doing okay? Any other really important questions?
No, we've got some feedback saying wonderful special tips.
All right. Let's see. I'm gonna do this wave. I'm gonna do a little reflections over here. Now this is transparent. This is kind of transparent. I'm going to put there, do some waves. This got kind of weird. The side of the building got kind of weird, so I'm going to put that back on there. And detail takes the longest of everything because it's a lot of work. I mean, it's a lot of work going in there and getting every little pine needle and all the little people and stuff. So, don't rush the end part. Don't rush wait and get all that stuff done nicely. Know what you have to do for the details. Like I wouldn't want to detail way back there. The center of interest is basically this whole sun area right here. And so just make sure that's a little bit more detailed and you can identify objects and stuff and it looks good. A little bit more texture. I'm just kind of dry brushing the paint onto the rocks. I wouldn't do that back there though, because it would be too much detail for the way distance back there. I mean, it's got too many blobs. Blobs are good. Blobs. That's what make all your blobs people. So tonight I have my Thursday night paint along that I do on Thursday nights at 6:30 Central Standard Time. So I'll be here again tonight doing another demonstration. And I'll be using Holbein paints again and all that and stuff, but it's of a violinist. And it's gonna be like just like I'm looking right now. It's gonna be like that. And so a lady, a violinist that we're doing tonight. And it's free. You can go there and see, you can use your paints that you just got from there and you can use it again. And I might put a little reflection of the people into the water and put a little reflection of them in the water too. And one thing I noticed that I should warn you is that when you do a horizon line in the ocean, see how it's going uphill? That is a no-no. It has to be totally horizontal and level. It's got to be totally level. So I've got to go back in here and I got one of these just kind of rulers type of thing. And I'm going to go there and actually lay it on the surface. I'm just gonna make a line there and just make it thick and make a line so that's straight again. I have to make that straight. It has to be straight. I cannot have it going up or downhill. See, I just put a little wash over that and I used the metal part here sits up above the paper. And so that don't put it on the paper and do that because it'll go underneath it. So just make it a line like that. And then one thing you have to do too is when you're going to wax it, I'm going to have to show you that you're going to have to sign it and do all this stuff right away because once you wax it, that's it. There's no more going back. It's protected then. It's almost like an oil then because it's basically waxed or varnished even. If you varnish it, you got to have it all done. Now I'm going to use a little bit of yellow here in the middle and I put it into water too. And again, I'm doing this opaque and I'm making it thick. But I do that on purpose because I want it to look a little bit different from the transparent wash, and it kind of gives it a neat look. I kind of like that look, where it has a little bit of a like an oil painting look or acrylic look with a thick amount of paint.
David, can you remind us what kind of dryer you are using today?
The one I think you should get is the craft. It's called Craft, but I was using a paint stripper.
Right, yeah.
And I don't think you want to get one of those. It was just it was a Wagner paint stripper, but they have one. It's called Craft, and I'm not sure. I think you guys said at Plaza Art that you may have that. It's called Craft Dryer, a Craft Dryer, and it's like a hair dryer. It's just like a hair dryer, but hardly any sound comes out of it. And if you go to my website, I may have it in my products page of what because I have a products page that shows everything I use. And it's uh yeah, it's called a craft dryer, I think.
See if I can find it. Your workshop you're doing tonight, you do that through YouTube?
Yes. You go to my website and it's right on my website, davidrbecker.com or beckerart.net. And it's yeah, it's all through YouTube. And right now I have over, I think 700 videos. I think it was something like that. I think we did our 701, I think, or was it 500? I think it was 700 videos that I've done since COVID because I started them during COVID, and I except every Thursday night I do a paint along, and there's always something different that we're doing. But if you get my newsletter, if you sign up for my newsletter on my website, we show you what we're painting. You can pick up the reference right on my website or in the newsletter or in the video. If you go to my Becker Art, if you go to YouTube and type in Becker Art or my name, you'll find my channel, and it's on there. And it starts at 6:30 Central Standard Time. 6:30. I wonder if no, I don't have the picture on here yet. But go to my website, you'll see the picture of the lady and she's actually, if I go to my website, here's my website actually. Let me show you. So here's my website, beckerart.net, and here's my studio paintings, my plein air paintings. This is the painting we're painting right there. My free watercolor painting on Thursday, March 13th at 6:30. And so there it is. So if you click on that picture, it gives you it takes you to the big picture, and you can just download that, draw it up, and then it's not so much a paint along, like you can paint along, but most people, I do this in 1 hour though. I painted in 1 hour, and the ones below there are the ones I did the week before. Like we did pigs last week, and we did a boat with seagulls the week before. So it's always a different lesson of some kind of lesson we're learning. And so you can do that every single week on Thursdays. Or you can do them not on Thursday. It's live though. It's live tonight, but then it's up there forever. So you can go back anytime you'd like. Let me go back to my tabletop here. And I think this one, I think is going to be finished now. And I'm just going to show you how to frame it. I'm going to sign it first because you got to sign it. Like I said, you got to sign it first before you get in there. And I always say that the signage should be opposite of your center of interest. So if your center of interest is over here, put your name over here. If it's over here, put over that side. Sometimes it doesn't work that way, but most of the time that works pretty well for your signature. I'm just going to sign it right here. How much more time do we have?
29 minutes.
20 minutes. Okay. That'll be perfect. I also have a little symbol. I make it, it's 11, 11, 11, and I make a DRB. And so I have a little stamp that I usually have, but now I'm just drawing it in and stuff. So pretty much, you know, and also you can use the gouache. Let me just show you really quickly too for the gouache. Like if you want, like on the edge of the tree, you want thick, you know, there's nobody says that you can't, you can do this. You can put like little lights on the side of the tree. Put in a little yellow and white. And again, you could also do this as a transparent watercolor, but you have to realize in the beginning of the painting, you'd have to put masking fluid there or something. So you use the white of the paper, because traditional watercolors do not use white paint. And so you would have to make sure that later on, before you even start, you know all your light marks are going to be, because you would put masking fluid there to keep the white of the paper. And that's how come you plan your watercolors. But since I've been using gouache, I don't do as much of it anymore because I just figure, you know, why not use a white paint right over it? And I don't have a problem with it. Certain societies, like you can't enter it because it's transparent water society, but like AWS, NWS, they're fine with it. They're all fine with gouache and using it thick. Right, let me just dry this real quick and I'm going to show you how to wax it. And why, you know, people ask me all the time, why would you want to wax it or why do you varnish it? And the most important reason I say is because I can get a lot more money for my paintings. And us watercolors have always been the back, we're always farther back than the oil painters because we never get as much money because we're putting our stuff behind glass and we're putting a mat on it and it looks like a print. And prints have gotten so good that you can't tell the difference between a print and an original. So a customer comes up to the, gallery or an outside art fair and they go, "Hey, that one's $300. That one's only $50." They look identical. They're the same. One's a print, one's a thing, but the print looks identical, even to the paper. I mean, the paper even looks the same. Everything about it looks exactly the same. So those people are not knowledgeable. They're going to buy the $50 one. They're not going to buy the $300 one. It's like, no way. It's the same. And so I think we did that to ourselves in the fact that, we do a lot of prints and stuff and we sell them cheaper. But now if you do like this and you wax it, you put it into a oil painting frame, it just looks just as good as an oil painting does. And so you can charge what the oil painters charge now. So that's one, I think, a really good reason to doing it that way. Let me just try this really quickly. And when you do wax it, you have to make sure it's totally dry. I mean, literally bone dry. And I learned that only because I've been doing the plein air scene. I've been trying to do the plein air painting scene, and I find that when you're in those things, you gotta frame them right away, right? You gotta frame them in your back of your car and stuff. And so you're like, have a piece of glass and mat and stuff, and try to do that in the back of your car or your van or whatever. It's next to impossible to keep the dust out of there and stuff. And so you take your watercolor, and I use Dorland wax, and it's just a cold wax. And let me just get some of the stuff out of the way here so you can see what I'm doing. Any more questions about the painting itself, painting it? Please let me know right now.
Well, we've got some on the waxing, so
What's that?
I said we've got some questions on the waxing, so
Okay.
good
I'll
timing for, yeah.
let me just get this stuff out of the way so you can see the wax. I'm gonna keep myself in there if you don't mind. So there's the wax. It comes in jars, the Dorland wax. It's called Dorland wax. I know that Plaza Art probably is Dorland wax, and it's cold wax. Oil painters use it to put into their oil paints and stuff, but it's basically a wax, and using mine's a little dirty, and you shouldn't do that. I lost a top for this one, so and you take basically you take a old t-shirt. Don't take a towel that has anything on a lint on it or something because you don't want lint into your painting. So t-shirts, old t-shirts are great for this. And basically you wad it up. It's a very simple thing to do. You can also, like I said, you can also varnish it, spray it with Krylon UV protection, I think it's called. Krylon makes a spray that you spray over it, and you got to make sure it's totally dry. And when you do this, make sure everything's right the way you want it because it's pretty much that's it. You can't go back in and because it's gonna take about a night to dry. And they have Gamblin wax also is another cold wax. They're just basically wax with a resin in it, and you take your paper or your old T-shirt and you dip in there. You grab some. Now I did this wrong, and the first time I did this, a couple years ago when I started doing this, and there's also like the wax, you think it's like varnish, right? And so you put it on thick. It's totally not what you want to do. 'Cause I did it way too thick. I was putting it on way too thick. So what you want to do, and you got to make sure it's dry, and it's not going to affect anything on your painting. It's not going to affect anything on there as long as it's dry. And what you do is you take it and you just rub it in. You rub it in. And like I said, if it's totally dry, it's not going to come off. Now this is a little damp still, so you're going to get a little bit of it on here because I have to do it now. So But wait a little bit until it's totally bone dry because my paper is even a little damp yet, and so you're gonna get a little bit coming off of there, but it's not gonna change your painting. And you notice I do it really light. I do little swirls like this, and I usually go from one side to the other, and I just kind of go in there, and you don't have to put a lot on, and you just rub it in there. And if you want it to be shiny, you'd have to do like 3 or 4 coats. And you let it dry overnight and then do another small coat. You don't put it on thick at all. If you feel the tackiness to it, that's too much. That's too much wax.
Can you talk about what the wax does for the painting?
What it's doing is it's going into the paper and combining with the pigment, and it's kind of making it an acrylic kind of in a way, because what it's doing is it's taking the watercolor and making it so that no longer it's not water soluble anymore. It's gonna turn it to a like a varnish, and it dries hard. It makes the pigment hard then, and it's a neat way of also bringing your painting together. It kind of evens it out. So if you have a part that's a little bit more thicker in paint and this part is a little bit thinner, or you did something with the paper, it kind of makes everything look good. It makes it look like you varnished it basically. And it doesn't have to be put on where it's shiny. It's not shiny if you don't buff it. It's just gonna look matte like a watercolor. But then I'm gonna show you in a second how it protects it. I can put water right over this. I can put water right on top of it, and you kind of feel it with your hand, and you feel that it's not tacky. You don't want it tacky. You want to rub it until it's not tacky. So that when I was doing it at the beginning, I was making it thick, so it was like shiny. And it's like, no. And one of the ladies said to me, who does this a lot with waxing, goes, "Oh, no, 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 David, that's way too much wax. It's never going to dry." So you want it to penetrate the paper, and it's going to penetrate into the pigment. And it's going to make the pigment hard. It's going to be hard into the pigment. And so it's never no longer a watercolor, because you can't do a watercolor on top of it because it's now protected with a base of wax, a varnish. It's like a seal. It's sealing it basically. So I'm going like this and see, it doesn't really change anything, right? I mean, the painting's still a painting, so the same colors. Let me see if I have a painting that I waxed. 1 second. And so here's a painting I did on, and I don't know that you know about these aluminum panels. So this is a panel, and what I should have done before I waxed this thing is I should have show you how to mount it on a panel. Well, Holbein, or I mean Legion, now makes these aluminum panels, and this was actually done on a sheet of drawing paper, which I didn't. I just used gouache on it, and so this is already waxed, and you can tell there's no difference, but it's protected. And I can put it right into the frame. But watch this. I can just take paint water. Can't see that. See, it just runs off now. And this is not even watercolor paper. This is just like drawing paper. And once it protects it, it just runs right off of there. Look at it, beads up and just runs right off. So fully protected. It's a paint that's already been done. This is a watercolor. But now I can no longer do anything to it, even though I didn't do it on watercolor paper. I've been messing with this. I've been showing a lot of people this stuff, so I do have my fingerprints all over this thing because I've been using it a lot to demonstrate with. But it's aluminum panel, and look, I even cut on it. My gosh. And so it's just amazing, these aluminum panels, especially for your plein air painters to take them outside and just paint. So I'm going to show you now really quickly is how I can make my paper into a panel. And I usually do this before or after. Usually I do this before I do the painting, so I can just mount it right into there. So I'm going to take this panel. I'm going to take a masonite panel. This is a masonite panel. This is actually you can also use a cradle panel or any kind of wood panel or plexiglass you can use. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount this paper, and I can do it now this way too. I mean, I like to do it before I do the painting and before I even wax too, but you can do it now too. And actually now it's protected, so I don't have to worry about getting a little bit of the glue down. And I don't use glue, I use gel medium. So Holbein has a gel medium. It's just, this is a big tube of it or a big thing of it, but it's just gel medium. Any kind of gel medium from any company, gel medium. This happens to be Holbein gel medium. And so what I do is I take the panel. You don't have to even rough this up, and you don't have to worry about what's in this in this panel, because this panel, the gel medium will protect it. And Golden actually did a test and stuff, and it's that this is the best thing to glue your paper to the panel with. Or if you don't want to glue it, you buy panels of watercolor paper. So what I'm gonna do now is take a brush. I'm just gonna take a bristle brush. And what I do is I put it on the paper and on the, let me just get this open. So this is gel medium. Just gonna take and squeeze some of it out, put it on the panel. I didn't clean this brush too well. So I'm just gonna apply it to the panel. And pretty generously, but not, you don't want to get really messy with it, because if you put too much on, it's going to spray out the side, and you don't want to get it on the paper. And that's how come I like to do this before I do the painting, because if I ruin the paper, then now the painting is done. So if I put this on top of it, oopsie. But now it's protected. I did protect it though. So I'm going to put this down here. I'm going to take some of this, squeeze it out on my brush, and just put it over the paper. And there's a little bit of paint on there. That's okay. Like I said, the gel doesn't let anything penetrate through to get to the paper. So when you're putting this gel down, it's protecting it. It's almost like a protectant from whatever board you used. If there's resin or something in the board, or some kind of thing that's in the board that's going to be going through to the paper, it won't be able to, because you're using this gel medium. And that was proven by, I guess they studied it by Golden, had did a research on this. The best thing to use to glue it down with is gel medium. So here's the panel that has stuff on it. You do it while it's wet. It's not like rubber cement where you do it when it's dry. You do it while it's wet. And I'm going to line this up, and this is 8.5 by 11. And so just going to put it down here. Now I always like to have a sheet of wax paper there, so I don't ruin my painting if I'm doing it after I get it done. And then I have a brayer somewhere here. Or a rolling pin. You can use a rolling pin too. Where the heck did it go? All right, I can't find my brayer. So I'm going to use this paper towel. I'm just going to roll and put the paper towel on there and just push it down and roll it across it. Like when you have a brayer, you just bray over it, right? I had one here a second ago. 1 second. All right, no, I can't find it. Anyways, and then you take your old sergeant book or your old books of, I like to take my old sergeant book and my old beautiful, it's a huge book, and I just lay it on top of there, put it on top, press down, and leave it overnight. Leave it overnight, let it dry. And then if you feel like you need another coat and you like it to be a little bit shinier, or if you feel like you want it to be the layers a little bit different, then put another layer on it. It's okay to put another layer on it. And you can make it as many layers as you want, and to the point where it's really shiny then, or leave it matte. You don't have to buff it. So see, now it's in the frame. I mean, now it's in now it's on a panel, and the reason you want it on a panel is so that you can now staple it onto a frame, and you don't. Right now, the front is covered, right? It's not longer paper. Now it's a panel, so now it's on a panel, and this panel happened to have like this white base on it, this masonite. It was one of those I bought at Menards. You can buy these at Menards. Now. How much more time do we have?
We have about 13 minutes.
Okay. I want to see what you guys did too. So we gotta give you a little time to show us what you guys did. So I'm gonna frame it. So get yourself a nice plein air frame, not a frame that's like for watercolor. This is more of a plein air frame because it like has its own part that looks like a mat, right? So this is a plein air frame, and they have all different kinds now. You know, they're ones that look more modern. Don't get some of these old ones. You know, people don't, especially young people, they don't like old frames. And so get yourself something a little bit nicer, newer, more modern, maybe. It helps when it comes to selling to, you know, younger people. You know, we oldies like myself, you know, we used to always do the gold, and they have some really beautiful frames nowadays. And I'm sure Plaza, do you guys sell frames?
Yes, we do. We do sell frames, and we
Yeah,
also
so
do custom framing if that's an option
there
that
you
you guys
go.
are interested in.
So what I do is now I'm going to turn this upside down. I'm going to put it right there. Just put it upside down. And I'm going to put it into there because I don't have to put glass on it. You know, it's protected now. It's protected. I showed you how the water runs off of it. And, you know, people will say, well, it's still a piece of paper. And well, yeah, but, you know, acrylics are on paper too, and they don't have glass on it. So there's no difference now because this is protected with a layer of the varnish type of thing. It's wax, but it's like varnish. And you saw me pull this stuff, and the water just rips right off of it. You can take and spray it. You have to, you know, don't spray it right away with water or Windex or whatever you do on your acrylic paintings. Whatever you do on acrylic paintings, you can do it now on this painting because now it's protected. And now it's not overnight yet. It didn't let it dry overnight yet, but I can frame it while it's like this, and just gonna put it in there upside down. Now it's in there. And that panel was really ugly in the back. So if you want to put like a dust cover over, that's fine too. You can do that. And then I'm gonna take I have a little box of all my framing stuff. Here is my, get one of these point drivers. It's a point driver by Logan. And you just kind of go in there, and I always like to go on both sides like this, just staple it in. Now, I already had some in there. Some of these frames come with these in, so I'm just going to bend them down. And then you wire it up like you do the wiring and stuff like that. That's all good. Just bending these down. Then voila, we have a framed work of art. Let me just go up a little bit higher from this. So there we have a framed David R. Becker. No, no glass, no matte, and it looks fine, you know. And again, different kind of frames make it look differently. You know, you get frames that have a little thing in here, white and stuff, and it's all up to you what you want, you know, all right? But now there's no frame, there's no matte, there's no glass, and then you can get a lot more money for them, a lot more money. I almost doubled my prices now because they're no longer behind glass, and it works. It really, I'm telling all my students, is like, why not do that if you're getting a little bit more for your, and they look more, they look like oils, and it's something. The perception is that when you go to a gallery, a lot of times all the oils all get all the big money, right? And the watercolors sit there in a corner, and they're always like they're the stepchild of the of the oils. They're not as good as the oils, but now they are, because there's a lot of artists out there in the plein air field too that are doing that, and putting really nice frames on them. They're getting the same prices now as the oil painters. So I think, any questions?
I do actually have one. I'm not sure if you answered this or talked about it at all, but after you wax the painting,
Mm-hmm.
are you able to go back in to paint over that?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope, not because it's like you're doing, I guess you could, not with watercolor, maybe with
Mhm.
oil, or maybe with, because there's wax. It's basically wax now. And even if it was a varnish, you could maybe use oils on top of that. Well, maybe not. I'm not sure. Yeah, no, you have to be done. You have to be pretty much done, especially with watercolor. Yeah, like I said, I even the signature, you know, I want to get it done because anything you can't put watercolor down anymore. It's just basically it's going to pebble. All the water is just going to run off, and so there's no more watercolor on this anymore. And it actually the wax brings out some of the look of the granulation and stuff. It really makes it look nice when you wax it or even varnish it. It gives but varnish depending on if you're using a matte or a gloss or a semi-gloss. You have to watch out for what you want it to look like afterwards. So I like to wax it instead of spraying it. But the one thing I realize is that if you spray it, you got UV protection. If you wax it, you don't. You don't get any UV protection because there's no UV protection in wax. But as a watercolorist, I like the waxing part. It's very simple. You saw how easy that is, and it's protected now. It's totally protected, and I can even see now. I would maybe do another coat. I like to put two coats on. I just feel like I probably missed something that when I did the first wash. I always like to do two, so I let it dry. And now since I actually had to get this out of the frame because I gotta put the book on top of the thing and let the dry onto the panel. But because you really should let it dry overnight, the paneling, and then also the wax, it should be overnight and just let it dry. But I think, or like if you don't want to, like I said, if you don't want to make your own panels, these aluminum panels, just pretty amazing. They come in 5 different sizes, and I'm actually doing some videos right now on them. And I have a bunch of them right here. And also, I don't know if you remember, I was saying that they come in black. They have black paper. So this is a panel, aluminum. It's aluminum panel, super dirty and durable. And like these, uh, even on the boards, they warp. And also the cardboard ones. But these, look at this. I mean, there's no way of bending this. You can bend it a little bit, but it is super solid stock. Now it's gonna be a little bit more expensive than cardboard, but boy, if you want some quality material, this is one way to go. This is the black watercolor paper that Stonehenge. You're working on the white right now, and this also comes in hot press and cold press. Well, not on the panel, but the paper itself. On the panel, you only get I think they only make right now. They only do the cold press. Yeah, the aqua cold press black.
Yeah, so Fran, about the panels, they are the aluminum panels, they are all the 1/8 inch thick, I believe. And they
Yep.
come in the 5 different styles. So there isn't a thinner panel for smaller paintings, but the panels come in smaller sizes, as small as like 5x7.
Yep.
Is that right, David?
Yeah, 5x7.
Yeah, and they're lightweight. Um, there are a couple other questions. Anne asks, is the wax susceptible to heat much?
Not after it's dry.
Okay.
Once it's dry, it's not no longer wax like you think wax is. It's a varnish. It's like it's a hard. It would be like if you had a oil acrylic. It's now no longer wax like it dries with the resin or whatever is in it. It makes it hard. So it becomes a hard wax. They use it for furniture too. They use coal wax for furniture polishing, so you can put it on furniture. So it definitely is protected of whatever paint that it's protecting the paint basically is what it's doing.
Kirsten asks, like car wax?
Um, Car wax
I'm
is
not
a
sure.
little bit runnier, and so this is a little bit thicker, and but you rub it in, and you can buff it to make it shiny. But I just like to rub it like I did, like I showed you. I just rub it, and so I don't want to feel it that it's thick though. And you don't have to do it like a car wax where you rub it off afterwards when you get done. So it's not exactly like car wax, but yeah, and you don't want to use car wax on your paintings either.
And yeah, just a little bit more about the aluminum panels, Fran. Yes, the paper is already adhered to the aluminum
Yep.
panel for the Legion panels.
And they have 5 different kind of papers. They have
Mhm.
the black cold press, the white cold press. They have the Yupo. You can get Yupo on it. They're white drawing paper. It's called Stonehenge White, and an oil paper. And there's oil paper that's for oil painters. So if you're an oil painter and you want to use their oil paint, it's really neat. And I just did a video. If you go to my YouTube channel, I just did a video on Well, actually, it's not up there yet. I've just been doing some of these videos for Legion because some people say, well, what happens if you mess up? You mess up on these panels. They're kind of expensive or they're really nice, but I feel like I have this aluminum panel. Now, what do I do if I make a mess of the painting and the painting doesn't? So there's three things I said you can do. One is use the back. If you're an oil painter or acrylic painter, you can use the aluminum actually. And so you can do that. You can also, apply another sheet of paper and glue like I just did and just use the panel again and glue another sheet of paper on top of it, or use the absorbent ground, like an absorbent ground or watercolor ground, and put that and paint that over the panel again. And I'm not sure, I've never tried this yet, but I'm not sure if you can apply the gesso ground or the absorbent ground or the watercolor ground over the wax. I'm not sure if you can do that. So I have to find that out. But I think you probably could because the ground is like a ground, right? Or like a gesso. And if you put it over it, especially when it's dry, after it's dried, like you can't when it's wet because it's wax basically. But I think when it's dry, it's no longer like wax based. It's like a varnish then. So but I still don't know quite about that. So this is one I had done on the aluminum panel. It's an aluminum panel again, and then some. Again, these things are so hard and so rough. I mean, and they're eighth. What are they? 1/8 inch, and they're so. I've tried when they first came out with them. Legion paper wanted me to destroy a piece of paper, and so I put boiling water on top of it, and it wouldn't come. I mean, it's already mounted on the paper on the panel, so there's no way of getting it off. Once it's on there, there's no way it's not coming off. I put boiling water on it. I heated with my heat stripper. I did that on the Yupo, thinking that the Yupo would bubble. Nothing. I mean, I spent a lot of time trying to get the paper off of this panel, and there's no way. I've tried every single way you can possibly think, except for maybe taking a knife and scraping it off. And I'm still thinking that somebody's gonna one of these days do something with these panels and expose the aluminum through the paper, because that could be kind of cool too, exposing the aluminum through the paper. But I haven't done that yet, but there's a possibility right there too. But it is paper. It is paper, and there's 5 different kinds of paper that they put on that they adhere to this panels. And then with Holbein just came out with these granulating colors. These are 24 granulating colors, and I did do a video on that in my YouTube channel, and they're pretty amazing. And the colors themselves are really, really they mix like 2 or 3 colors together, and as you can see, they they kind of separate a little bit. So this is like a pink and an orange in one. This one is kind of like a burnt orange, and they do have kind of weird names if you can read them. Cherry blossom, pink and stuff like that. But pretty amazing color. They got these 2 purples or 3 purples that purple's my favorite color, but they have blue and they have a little bit of orange in them. And so those are 24 colors they just came out with. And I didn't ask them yet if they are the same as their transparent, because these are not opaque. These are not gouache. These are Holbein artist watercolors. So I guess they are like their regular paints. So they would not dry like a hard rock, basically. It's a little advertising for Holbein because I really do love their products, and same thing with Legion. This paper, the Legion paper they got sent, it's a good paper. It's a really good paper. It's not as expensive as an Arches. Arches gets kind of expensive. And actually, I used to be an Arches paper guy, and but it starts now to me it soaks it up too much. I like to sit on top a little bit more. I like my paints to float, and so a lot of times with the Arches, it just sucks it into the paper more than I like now because I've gotten so used to this paper. And like I said, you can get it on a panel, or you can just get it as sheets or blocks. You can get it in blocks too.
Okay,
So-
before everyone has to run away, it's like just a couple minutes after 3, but I do want to give everyone an opportunity to share what they painted today. So anyone who wants to turn their camera on, change their view to gallery view, and show your painting on screen so we can all see how everyone did today. Yay! I can see
Hey, I see Tim.
Sean's.
Hey, Tim, where's yours?
Yeah, Tim, while everyone's sharing, do you want to talk a little bit more about the new sets? I can unmute you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tim from Holbein, and we're in Burlington, Vermont. So I've been watching today. We're so happy to bring David Becker to you vis-a-vis the Plaza folks. Two great operations here, and we're really proud of David and his work today. David alluded to our granulating sets. The Holbein has actually introduced over 92 new colors. There'll be 24 granulating, 11 luminous, and we have brand new, just received some iridescent colored sets. So those will be coming. No, David, outstanding stuff. I really love the way you use the Dorland's wax. People typically use sprays, and so I think a Dorland's wax to me is a little bit more uninvasive and a little bit more comprehensive. And David is spot on. I can tell you historically with our business here, when we talk with oil painters, they'll tell you, oh, we make so much money. And the big thing is glass. It is absolutely 100% true. If you wish to add or double your fees for your paintings, you must mount them behind a nice frame that David has presented, and of course without glass, and use the wax. So Plaza has been a great supporter of ours. They'll have all our new watercolor sets. We're just rolling those out as we speak. So exciting things coming from Holbein.
Great. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming today. It looks like we're at the end. We enjoyed this with David again. Thank you for coming again, David, for the second time. We've already had requests for you to come back, so we'll get that on the books as soon as we can. Thanks everyone for coming, and we hope to see you on the next one. The video will be available on YouTube, most likely sometime tomorrow. We'll send an email out through Plaza Artists email subscription. So just keep an eye out for that. You can also find us on YouTube at Plaza Art, and hope to see you soon. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Outstanding.
Thanks so much.
Great stuff.
Yeah, look great that you showed. It was awesome.
Bye.